And I'd like to introduce our moderator, Traci Lee, who is the editorial manager for NBC Asian America, which is the first outlet, national Asian American focused outlet of its kind. And also a big thank you to NBC Universal's Talent Infusion programs for sponsoring this program.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so much. Have you guys all been sitting here all day? I'm trying to make this super interesting for you. Well, it gets lonely sitting up here by myself, so I'm going to bring up the rest of the panel. Do short introductions because they can probably tell you a lot better than I can just reading their biography, the work that they do, and I'm really excited to hear more from them as well. So first, I want to bring up Naren Shankar. Call you up first. He is currently the executive producer and showrunner of The Expanse on Sci-Fi. Anywhere you want, any seat you want. Also, I want to bring up Sujata Day. Sujata is, as many of you who are familiar with the LA Asian Film Festival, a very familiar face here. She had her directorial debut with her short film here at the LA Asian Film Festival last year. You probably know her from The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl and HBO's Insecure. And last but not least, Kabir Akhtar, who is a director and editor. He is an Emmy-winning director and editor. Emmy-winning editor for Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, 2016, was it?
Yes.
Yes, and has
I'm very well spoken.
many nominations under his belt for his work that ranges. What other work have you done? You've done the Academy Awards, you've done Arrested Development.
New Girl, Speechless, Alex Inc., Unsolved Mysteries. I could go on for a while, but I won't.
Tons of things. And again, like I said, our panelists can tell you a little more about the work that they do. And in fact, we'll just jump right in. Let's start at the end of the row here. Naren, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you currently do, and in the work that you're doing, tell us a little bit about both the opportunities and the challenges that face you when it comes to diverse storytelling.
I'm currently the showrunner, executive producer of a show called The Expanse. It's on the Sci-Fi Network. We're just started premiering season 3. It's I don't know if anybody watches it or knows the books. It's an interesting thing from a diversity standpoint because it's a science fiction show that's set in about 150 years in the future. Human beings have colonized the solar system out into the asteroid belt, Mars, Moon. Part of the idea that's in the books is the people who went out in space are a polyglot of Earth's culture. It's a mixture of Indians, Chinese, Russians, Americans, and so the cast in the books is very diverse, and we reflected that when we cast the show, and it's a pretty interesting broad spectrum of different actors.
I was going to say, you said this in past interviews before, but just that concept of taking something that was already a book and you've got these characters that are very well established. For instance, one of your characters is half Samoan or of Samoan descent, and you also casted the actress to make sure that reflects it. What were the challenges around doing that to make sure that your casting actually reflects what the books were telling you? Well,
finding one is actually the biggest challenge because we had a character that was a 6-foot-tall, part Samoan, Polynesian descent. That's not easy to find. So we ended up looking in Hawaii, New Zealand, Australia, England, Los Angeles.
Samoa?
I
mean, if you're looking for a Samoan.
Often of Samoan, yes, but it's a small acting pool, perhaps, in Samoa. Yeah. So yes, it's a good point. But we ended up finding the actress in New Zealand. But it does take a little bit of work. I mean, and happily, we didn't get pressure from the studio or the network to say, no, maybe this is like a waifish blonde girl would be fine in this part. So that was never actually an issue.
Got it. Kabir, how about you with your work that you're doing, and tell us a little more about kind of what you're doing, what your career has kind of spanned, at least, because you've got a lot under your belt, and sort of, like I had asked Naren, the opportunities and the challenges that face you when it comes to diverse storytelling and ensuring that diverse storytelling comes through in the work.
That's such a broad question, but a good one. I think that it's been really exciting the last few years because suddenly it seems like everybody cares about diversity. I'm not sure exactly how or why. I feel like all the studios have done work, and I feel like a lot of people have been doing a lot of work on the the union side, and like people like actors. Everyone's just been making more and more noise about it. And obviously, society is really paying attention to it. But suddenly, man, everywhere you go, every meeting is like, diversity is really important to us. It's like it's been programmed into everybody. Like, diversity is really important to us. I'm like, cool. Where'd you hear that? But it's true now. Everyone really cares, and it's become so much easier on shows to cast people. Like you were saying, they don't all have to be like, like a wafy blonde girl as the lead, which is fine. That's fine. If that's what you are, cool. I'm not one, so I've had a hard time getting that job. But it's become it's clearly relevant and matters to people now, which is great. Think about the shows that people are making. You couldn't have gotten a lot of these shows on the air a few years ago. Your show, Insecure, question mark, fresh off the boat? No way, it's incredible what's happened. As far as my own work, I just feel like I just am constantly just shaking people to be like, let's, be more representative. Let's be more representative. And people seem to be listening now, which is great, I like to think that it's because I've gotten farther in my career. But secretly, I think it's actually, no one actually cares what I think.
I think it's something that's changed actually quite a bit, because what's the interesting thing is 20 years ago, let's say 15 years ago, people were interested in diversity, but not the leads. The story, the voice couldn't be that way. It's like, could his, very good at computer friend be the Indian guy? Right. It was like that.
He's got a cool next door neighbor.
Right, exactly. So that's the thing that's changed, is that, we're at a lucky time in storytelling where you want unique voices, where different stories, different aspects of life are coming through. And now they understand that that's a commercial thing, that there's value in that, and that they can actually build a show around a different perspective of America or living in America. That's, I think, what has changed, because everybody's really been behind it for a lot of years. Now it seems like now we can make a show around it.
Yeah, definitely.
Now we're all cool.
Now we're trendy, exactly.
I think diversity is trendy now because it's making a shitload of money. And there's the proof is in the pudding. Just the success of movies like Girls Trip and Get Out, and people are like, oh my gosh, what's the Asian Girls Trip? What's, Crazy Rich Asians coming out? All of this stuff is proving financially to the executives who are making the monetary decisions that, oh my God, we're losing out on a huge audience that is willing to pay $16 for tickets to go see a movie, and willing to pay subscription fees for new networks and new streaming places. So it's mostly about the money, and that's why diversity is so hot right now, I think.
And Sujata, when it comes to creating characters, and you work on a show, we talked about Insecure, where the characters are being created by people behind the scenes who are also of those communities, which I think is also surprisingly rare these days. And you're not having a white person write your voice. And you as a writer yourself, when you're creating characters, what kind of opportunities do you look for to tell stories that aren't the mainstream stories, or the stories that people are used to seeing of Asian people? We have a limited definition of what Asian is sometimes. How do you kind of break out of that?
I think when I'm going into pitch meetings nowadays, they're just looking for the authentic story. So everything that I've been writing is based on something that has actually happened to me, and then I expand it from there, so that when I can start the pitch, I can be like, oh, well, this time my mom did this, and this is what happened, and we're Bengali, and this blah, blah, blah. And they really respond to that, because they are done with, they know that we'll cause an uproar if there's a white dude creating an Indian family sitcom. That's just not gonna fly. You can tell, I went out for pilot season this year, and you could tell the pilots there were a lot of Indian female roles in these pilots, and they were all leads, and you could tell the roles that were written by white people. And it just, I would just be reading it, and be like, that's not what happens at a wedding. That's a really weird situation that they're in. And then I'll look at the writer, and I'll be like, oh, okay, I see what happened here.
I'm trying to think, are there any particularly stupid things that you read in hypothetical scripts that shall remain nameless that seem like, nope, this just doesn't happen? Because I definitely have encountered this with people where you're like, I'm like, that's not ever been my experience, No one ever treats me that way. They're like, well, we really feel like representation is important. And, obviously, we know that, people of your whatever, and then they get stuck on the word. Is it ethnicity? Is it background? I seriously don't know if I'm supposed to check Asian ever. I'm not even sure.
Oh, I never know that either.
Do you check Asian?
Yeah.
Hey, South Asians, do you guys check Asian? Because I truly don't know.
I've sometimes checked other, because I was never
I always
sure.
check other. I'm like, I'm not sure. if I count.
So do you feel like you're,
Thanks for having me.
So that's interesting because this panel title is called Don't Call It a Comeback, which can mean anything. But you kind of have all touched on this about how, like, you've been in this industry, you've been working, these are your stories. At the same time, I think a great example right now, and you tweeted about this recently, Kabir, is about The Simpsons. You know, everyone is saying, oh, well, there wasn't outrage before, and now people who say that they're Asian are upset, and you rightly pointed out that the outrage has always been there.
Yeah, no one was listening, and we didn't have a platform. Like individuals, like every one of us can get heard now for saying something, saying something smart enough and the right person catches it, and like it's out there to 1 million people, Yeah, I think we've all been like, yeah, like you were saying, certainly growing up, the only time I ever saw brown people on TV was, funny next door neighbor who talked like this, computer guy who talked like this, and
Or a white person playing an Indian.
Or my favorite, yeah, that's always my favorite, yeah.
I think those are even a little in the rear view mirror when I was a kid, thankfully, because now you see them and they're incredibly disturbing.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like there's certain movies and certain things that you just go, how did they do that and why, and please never again.
Hamilton, right? Hamilton's a great example of it, going the other way,
The other
and
way,
then suddenly you're
exactly.
like, oh, that's incredible. And at first it's like a little disorienting for everybody, because you're like, oh, I just haven't seen that done like that. But that's, yes, of course, and what a great point that makes that I just realized just now.
And the beautiful thing about it is when you see like a kid in Hamilton, they don't even notice it.
Right.
And that's awesome.
Yeah. Do you feel, and Sujata, I'll start with you as someone who has been reading a lot of these scripts lately, do you feel represented when we talk about not just diversity, but in the context of Asian American, which I think is a very tricky question because sometimes I think our community might not want to talk about it, but do you feel represented when we talk about Asian Americans?
I do, and this is a recent thing, though, because I feel like we have been kind of disparate for so long, and even within Asians, there's like East Asians, and and I'm learning about all of that there's like difference between like people who hang out with like Chinese people and Japanese people and Vietnamese people and Filipinos. And now we are, within the past 2 to 3 years, I've noticed that we have all started to come together, and this is really important that we do that because I have seen how important that was for the Black community to get together. 7 years ago, when I started Awkward Black Girl, we had no idea it was gonna go anywhere. And that was when Ava DuVernay was starting out, Barry Jenkins was starting out, Lena Waite was starting out, and they all supported each other so hard that I was like, oh my God, we gotta do this in our community. I don't see this happening at all. So within the past, I will say 2 to 3 years, we've been starting to come together, and I think it's really important for the success of our community as a whole.
Kabir, how about you? Do you feel
I just
represented?
really liked what she said, and I forgot the question.
Do you feel represented when we talk about Asian America?
No, not at all. Not one bit. I do a lot of work with at the DGA. I'm part of the Asian American Committee. I've been a co-chair of the Asian American Committee. And, we joke around about how I'm secretly the chair of the South Asian Subcommittee, because there's like 2 or 3 of us, who show up to these. It's the smallest diverse. Like the DGA has diversity committees, like African American Committee, like Women's Diversity Committee, Latino Committee, and then there's Asian American, and it's like a very small slice of the overall representation, obviously. And then like South Asians are a much smaller piece of even that piece. So, like I said, I don't know if I belong. I was excited that you mentioned this, this panel today, but I was also like, oh, okay. Cool, I'm excited that we can talk about this. It's great to have a place to fit in, because what you say is very right. Like, the larger of a sort of a, en masse we can all be together, the more likely we are to get taken seriously, I think.
I do think some of that is cultural. I mean, my parents emigrated to the States in like around 1960, and that was that was in a wave of doctors and engineers. My father was a doctor. What a surprise. But I think that part of it was when I went to school to be an engineer, and when I finally...
So did I.
There you go.
I started off in engineering, and then I realized
And well,
it wasn't for me.
And see, here we go. And so when I got out of grad school, I said, I don't want to be an engineer anymore. I want to be a writer. My parents had no idea what that was, and culturally there was no reference point for it. It was doctor, lawyer, engineer, businessman. That's what you did when you got an education. I think so. Happily in the last 30 years or so, I think that is starting to change. People see a viable career, and culturally it's more attached to who these communities are, and that's, so I think it's gonna happen more. It was not very common a while ago.
And Naren, what do you think is, I'm asking you guys to solve all of the diversity issues ever, so get ready for it. But Naren, what do you think has been missing in the conversations that the community has had, us as creators here? What kind of conversations do you think we need to be having to make sure that the term Asian America is inclusive and that we are opening opportunities for people who maybe don't think that that's an option for them?
Wow, that's a big question.
Fix it, dude. Fix it.
Fix it.
Fix it all right now. 5 minutes, go.
I'll jump in if you want.
Stories with unique viewpoints that other people want to see?
I do think, and this is never going to happen, but I think the term is just way too either broad or specific. It's not, it's sort of like, it's complicated and it's confusing, you know? There's like so many people on the planet that aren't just like Asian or Latino or African American, you know, or whatever. Like, it's confusing for sure. It's a very complicated issue. But, you know, Sujata knows how to fix it.
Oh my goodness. I feel like what I love to see, what I love to watch on TV is a very specific point of view. So let's say you're Laos American. I would love to see a show about your family and the intricacies of being Laos American. All of my stuff is about my specific experience about being Bengali American, which is different from being Gujarati, which is definitely different from being Punjabi, South Indian. And we all have these amazing, unique things about what specifically we are, and that's the stuff that people are buying right now. So I think it's just important for us all to come together. If we create something specific, but then you see the universality of it, that's going to help bring us all together. And also just supporting stuff that's coming out. Like Crazy Rich Asians, I saw it last week. It was unbelievable. And it didn't tell my particular story, but it didn't matter because it was so fun. And parts of it, I think everyone will relate to something or somebody in it. And it's just important for us to be really vocal, especially on Twitter and Instagram about it, because I think that's going to make a lot of decisions in terms of what gets greenlit at the big studios going forward.
That's a really interesting thing that you just said, that you related to it, even though you're not, you know, maybe that specific ethnicity. I sometimes wonder if we're getting to the point, though, where it's going to be like, well, you can't write about something if you're not that thing. And that's something that I just sort of, you know, muse about occasionally, because that will be a weird thing, because I think that, like, from a writing standpoint, the most important thing a writer can have is empathy. And so that if you empathize with a subject, if you really attach to it, if you really look hard into it and feel something for it and bring a different viewpoint to it, or emphasize something else about it when you're making it, that's also a great thing. And we're in a very tumultuous time, I think, right now. But it's fascinating and cool.
What are the kind of stories that you would want to see on TV right now, or film?
I'll tell you what, I just watched an episode a week or two ago of Alex Inc., which is Zach Braff's show on ABC on Wednesdays. So it doesn't matter. I work on the pilot, and we hope it keeps going. And they did it, so the family is multicultural. Like Zach Braff is married to an Indian American, and they have hybrid kids. And the kid, this is like the most like weirdly earth-shaking thing I've ever experienced, and this just happened a week ago. So this kid is like, in middle school, right? And is having trouble, he's got a crush on the girl, and he's having trouble impressing the girl because the girl is into this other guy because he's like all super multicultural and diverse. And he actually says the line on a network show in prime time. He's like, I'm not Indian, I gotta be more Indian. I gotta convince her I'm more Indian. And I'm like, whoa, bro, this never happened when I was a kid. Like, that was so exciting to see. I'm like, what? And so, like, he's trying to teach her about, like, Holi and Diwali and all that. I'm like, whoa, what is happening, man? I love that we're cool now.
You're trendy now.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to last.
Take it while you can.
Yeah.
I want to make sure also, if there's an opportunity, if anyone has any questions or wants to hear about any specific project that any of our panelists are working on, you can feel free to interrupt. Don't interrupt me, but raise your hand, and then I'll point at you if there's anyone who wants to ask anything. If not, I'll just keep interrogating them. Yes, right up front.
I'm curious representation of trans perspectives or people with differing abilities, and do you think, like, is that becoming part of the conversation? Or?
I think it is. If you couldn't hear, the question was about, other, like, opening. I can't say it as well as she did, so I'll just answer it. But yeah, you look like, Speechless, for example, right, has about a family with a kid who's got CP, and
Pose, Ryan Murphy's new show coming out, looks amazing.
yeah, see? But I think what's really interesting also is that I think we all, none of us have to worry about it, I don't think, but there has to be, I don't think there's yet a level of care at the decision-making suite for people to say, to avoid saying, oh, well, cool, that's our show about that. Oh, we have Fresh Off the Boat is the Asian show. Here we got this Indian show. Like, whoa, bro. Like, I think that's what's happening now. Is there's a lot of like, well, we have one. I'm like, really? I feel like we could have a lot more than one of a lot of this.
And I don't know if either Naren or Sujata want to answer that about sort of opening doors for other kinds of diversity.
I feel like
I pretty much
you
got it.
killed it, yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? Yes, right up front.
Because we have so much diversity now, do you think that gave ABC a cover to let Roseanne have jokes about we had to wake up and see the black, and miss the black shows and the Asian shows? Is it because there is diversity that they got away with saying that, whereas opposed to when Roseanne actually came on, that never could have done that joke because it never would have existed. And so, but then I felt also like it put the Asian and the black filmmakers who were at ABC or creators, like they really couldn't respond to that because that was a hit show to hit like sitcom.
Man, that's a dangerous question, but I think that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm not racist. I got a black show on.
It's the my best friend is sort of answer here, right?
Yeah.
Is it easier for people to get away with those kinds of jokes at diverse communities or communities of colors at their expense because you've got diversity now?
There's a terrific piece about Roseanne that Emily Nussbaum did in the New Yorker, just reviewing it. It talks about almost exactly what you're talking about, and it's sort of a strange argument because the Roseanne show is not the only show about sort of lower middle class whites in America. The Middle has been on. There's other
Bob's
shows.
Burgers.
There you go. Keep going. It's like so to describe it as like they've got representation for them. It's a little bit disingenuous. You might check that piece out in the New Yorker. It's quite good.
Yes, right there in the back. Okay, I don't know if there's a mic. You want to come up here? I'll hand you the microphone if that's all right. Okay.
I think that's great. Actually, I've had Naleep, I don't know if you're familiar with Naleep, they've reached out to me and I've been on panels for them. And when they ask me, I'm like, oh, is this a mistake? Do you think I'm Latina? And they're like, no. no. We actually want the panel to be really diverse. And then it's me.
They've never said yes. Sorry, get out of here.
So that I get on the panel, it's me and like 4 amazing Latina actresses, and I'm like, oh, I feel like this is really confusing for everybody. But I really appreciate getting called in for other panels, and I get called in for diversity panels all the time with Asians on the panel and Black people, and it's a mixture. So I think, and usually it's videotaped, and I feel like the kids that you're talking about that you think will benefit from seeing someone like me talk about this are on YouTube, where this will probably go up on YouTube and then they can find it. So we are trying to bridge the gap between all of the people of color communities, and I'm seeing that happen as well.
Do you think that, I don't want to use the phrase echo chamber because sometimes like, that is a negative connotation, but do you think that there is a fear that because you can get your media anywhere these days, you can pick and choose your TV shows, you can pick and choose your news even, do you think there's a fear that people are kind of isolating themselves? And the Roseanne example is a great one. People are choosing the things that they want to watch, but it doesn't give them a larger point of view. How do you think we can bridge that gap?
Between like white people and us? Is that the question?
Essentially, that's phrased really weird. How do you think that you can get your perspective as a Bengali American, your story out to people who look at you on paper and say, "Oh, that's not my story." So like, I don't know if I can identify. I don't know if I can relate.
Oh, I mean, I think there's a really easy way to get your story out, and it's just writing it and shooting it and putting it up wherever you want to put it up. And I come from like a Hollywood utopian experience where 7 years ago, I was on this web series that was not going to go anywhere. And so from that point forward, everyone else on the cast and crew of Awkward Black Girl, we were so inspired to just create our own stuff and put it up there, regardless of if it goes viral or not. I had like 2 other web series after Awkward Black Girl that didn't necessarily go viral, but they got me with my management company. They got me into pilot auditions or whatever. So it's not all about going viral. It's about literally putting your story on paper or whatever story you want to tell. It doesn't have to be your specific story, and putting it up there. YouTube is there, Vimeo is there. Just, create something. Everyone has an iPhone or a Samsung or a Google phone that can shoot really well. Buy some like super cheap like sound equipment on Amazon and get out there.
I'm curious right now about sort of the kinds of stories that you're excited about coming up. You mentioned Crazy Rich Asians. What kinds of TV shows or films are you seeing that you're like, that's really cool and I want to make sure that gets elevated? What kind of projects are coming up that you guys are excited about seeing? You can promote yourself, it's okay.
Anyone out there have a project they're excited about seeing? Well, that's why I was talking about that Alex Inc. story. I thought that was really, really inspiring, But I already told that story.
And Naren, how about you?
In the context of diversity, I'm just trying to think. I'm literally just wrapping up our season and just starting to do development stuff. So I'm not like focused on specifics. You have read a lot of pilots and seen a lot of pilots, and like I didn't do
I'm not
any
excited
of that
about any of those
year.
pilots
So,
coming out.
yeah.
Who knows what's going to get picked up or not? But I've been in the independent film community for a while, and I'm really excited. My friend Justin Chan is starting to shoot his first, not his first, but another movie today. It's his first day of shooting, and I loved Gook, and I'm excited for anything that comes out that Justin is a part of. I think there's freaking Sorry to Bother You, Boots Riley. That looks amazing. I can't wait to see that. I don't know. I'm trying.
You know what I'm really interested in is sort of the opposite of that question. Is that there's definitely things coming up that I look at that I'm like, how really still? Like I'm having a difficult time thinking because of a specific one, but I feel like I'm constantly reading about projects coming, and I'm like, oh, no service is given at all to being representative in this project at all. Like at the creator level or the casting level or the story level. I'm like, we have definitely seen 100 shows about this family or about this workplace or about this city or about whatever it is. I find that like disappointing. Yeah. There are definitely like, and I get that it's easy in a way for networks to say, cool, we definitely want to see a show about these 2 young white people trying to make it. I'm like, never seen that before.
But do you feel like the opportunity there, at least for diversity, there's more of it at least out there? Like you actually see at least the opportunity where, oh, I don't have to watch the show about 2 white people trying to make it.
Yeah, I mean, technically I never had to watch those, so. But that would be really bad.
Is there any other questions out there?
Yeah, over there.
Oh, yes. Oh, see
Oh.
there.
Oh, and a mic.
I'm loud
There we go,
enough. Okay. So, being a South Asian American like you guys, I'm curious to know, over the years, we've seen characters that constantly have the Indian accent. I still think we're fighting that stigma a little bit. So, how do you guys think that we could get to Hollywood creatives to let them know? Because we're born here, we've grown up here, that's not how we talk. Yet, there's still, at some point, I feel characters that are still. Actors are walking into rooms having to still portray those accents. So how can we walk away from something like that? What are your thoughts about it?
I can definitely answer that. With every single pilot that I went on this year, I didn't have to do one accent, and everybody that got booked, they're not doing any accents. So I think they've heard the message. I think they understand that we are American and grew up here. Yeah, I feel like they've already heard the message. I know, like, we've been talking about Hari's problem with Apu, and that is actually so amazing because it's escalating the conversation so quickly. And so I think we're going to see a lot less of accents happening, unless it's like a parent or a grandparent where it like makes sense to have the character have an accent.
Right, a story reason is one thing, but obviously none of us talk like that, or at least we're not during this panel for some reason. But I think a lot of that has to do with people and the willingness of actors to say no to that sort of thing. I mean, how you see characters, right? With like if I'm not an actor, but if you were brought in for an audition, and they're like, "Cool, we want you to play Heather," and you're like, question mark, is that problematic? Not necessarily, but could you have a name that was more like Sujata, for example? Maybe, I think that the more you see it happen, the more normal it becomes for people to see. You know what I mean?
Any other questions? Oh, in the back there as well?
You talked about training as an engineer and then transitioning into film. Can you all talk about kind of how you got your break and who your mentors are?
I think that
Yeah,
covered
that's
all
it.
of us, apparently.
Yeah.
So,
Mostly you.
I started as an art student. I transferred into engineering, and I stayed all the way through graduate school. And then I decided I didn't want to be an engineer anymore, and I told my parents I was going to be a writer. And I had done a bunch of just writing for fun when I was in college with a bunch of guys, and they had decided, sort of on a whim, to like come out to LA and say, well, we're just going to be screenwriters. We're going to get in the movie business. And then when I got out of grad school, they said, you should come out and be a screenwriter. And I said, that sounds great. And I told my parents, and my mom cried, and then drove out to Los Angeles. And I got very lucky. I had I got an internship on Star Trek: The Next Generation through the Writers Guild, and they held me on there as a science consultant after that went through, and I got chances to write screenplays and pitch stories, and I got very lucky. About a year and a half after I came out, I got on staff, and I've been working ever since.
I mean, I got out of engineering after one semester. It was just not my jam at all. I was like, I really like watching Discovery Channel shows about how they made that thing, but I don't want to do it. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do at all. I spent all my time in theater. I'd always done that, in elementary school, middle school, high school, college. I was in theater way more than I was in class. And for my senior year of college, a friend of mine's like, what are you doing after you graduate? I was like, I don't know, man. And he's like, you should go to film school. I'm like, that's stupid. I'm not going to film school. I'm like, I'm the math and science guy. My parents have always been like, you're the math and science guy. And
What
he's
did
like,
your parents say?
well, that's the thing. So I was standing there in this McDonald's parking lot with him, and I was like, that's dumb. And he's like, why? You spend all your time in theater. You're a communications major, and you like movies. And I was like, and it was like that. And I was like, wow. And totally that night, I was like, I think I'm going to apply to film school. And my parents are like, all right. And I was like, great. They're very smart and lovely people, but they have no idea what I do. Like none. Sometimes there's like an article, I'm like, oh, I'm speaking at this panel. Oh, we know what that means. Cool. Sounds very good.
My dad has a PhD in mechanical engineering, and they were basically like, you're going to be a doctor and engineer. I was like, all right. Don't want to go to school for like 12 years, so I'm going to be an engineer. Got my systems and control engineering degree, got a kick-ass job when I graduated, and they relocated me to LA, and little did they know that they were moving me to act and write and be in entertainment. So they moved me out here, and then I would just like literally not go to work and go to acting class and get headshots and go to auditions. And then they laid me off after a year, which was amazing because you get severance and unemployment. And and it was all part of the grand plan. And then
Were you doing an intentionally bad job to get laid
yeah,
off?
yeah.
Sick.
I was consulting with Accenture, and basically you never work unless you're put on a project, and so I just tried to never get on a project. I think I was on a project for like 2 weeks out of that entire year. I can't believe I survived for that long. And then after that, I just got really lucky in terms of I was booking commercials right away, and that's when I kind of broke the news to my parents, because I think with my parents, it was more about like, are you going to be able to support yourself? Are you going to be stable enough? Are you making an income? And national commercials pay really well, so they were like, okay, keep doing this. And you said something about a mentor and your big break. I gotta thank Issa Rae. I met her on Twitter 7.5 years ago, and we both had like 10 followers at the time. And a couple days after we were following each other, she wrote, I'm looking for a mixed-looking person to play my best friend on this show. And I said, I'm not mixed, but this is what I look like. Let me know if you want me to come in. And she was like, come on in. And the audition was at her house, which is super shady. Never go to an audition at a house. I think that's like banned now from SAG. That's like a thing.
You can definitely not do
Yeah,
that. There's nothing safe about that at all.
But it went great, and I got the job. So yeah, don't do that. Don't go to.
Take risks, but with limits. With limits. Just be a little cautious.
Like if it's in a really nice house, maybe. But not if it's too nice, because then that's weird too.
I don't know if that's necessarily good advice.
Suddenly
either.
everybody
It's just
knows.
not good advice. It's like-
You guys, yeah.
Kabir and Naren, do you have mentors in this industry, and who have sort of been your mentors in those?
So many people. The first one that comes to mind is a feature director and now TV director and EP of a lot of shows, Troy Miller, who I met when I was 27. I just got recommended to do a job for him, and I did, and it was a lot of fun, and we got along very well, and he just kept hiring me for years and years and years, and that is a short story.
Probably Ron Moore, who did Battlestar Galactica. We went to college together, and we've been best friends for a billion years. And yeah, he dragged me out here and said, "Come out in the business." And when he was breaking in, and so here I am.
Cool. Any other questions before we wrap up? Right in the front here.
So it's funny, I work with Hollywood engineering. So all of you guys are inspiring me to jump ship down here. But my question is, when you were commenting on how there's different Asians, I was having a conversation with my friend Filipino. He said, well, you're kind of a weird Asian. You're in a different space because you're not exactly Asian, but you're not Pacific Islander. You're kind of in the middle. And so when you're talking about diversity being money-making and how some people have said that I would be considered ethnically ambiguous, is there more power to identify yourself as your true identity or being, because there's some people that just want to be identified as a good actor, but to say, I'm an Indian actor or I'm a Filipino actor, or what do you think how Hollywood is thinking now?
I mention casually at the end of every meeting that I'm brown. I do. Just to sort of put it out there in case no one noticed, which I think they have, but just also to make people feel a little bit better about it. Like, it's okay, like, hey, also, like, checking the box because just pragmatically that helps these days, finally. But also, I don't know, I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm like an Indian American director. Like, people are always like, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm from Philly, because that's where I'm from. And that question can be confusing, But I don't know, acting, you probably
I would
know better.
say identify with what you feel most comfortable identifying with, because I also have many friends who were mixed. So there's like papas and like biracial, and I know that comes with a whole other set of issues and things like, oh, I'm not black enough, I'm not white enough, I'm not this enough. So I would say, I think it only helps now to be ethnically ambiguous. So I would say lean into that as much as you can.
And if you jump ship from engineering, you can go to all these folks here for their advice.
Wait, did you do it too? Did you also jump ship on engineering?
No, I never even tried. Yeah, I thought about it, and my parents still think I'm going to go to pharmacy school someday, so there's that. But it's like, you don't want me as your pharmacist, trust me. One last question, and then we'll wrap it up in the back there. There's a microphone coming to
Here
you.
comes
so
the
you
mic.
can shot.
Here it
Yes, right
comes.
behind you. There you go.
There it is.
What advice or what would you tell a newcomer about the distribution process for their TV pilot?
Have you already shot it?
So we got it funded already, and the people that are funding it are also thinking about distributing it or going to networks to distribute it. In terms of the filming part, we start filming next month. I just want to know like ahead of time, just so we come prepared for any situation that comes about that.
I've sort of been through this process recently. I would say, probably don't shoot the whole pilot. I think people respond better to like snippets, like pilot presentations in terms of like 5 to 8 minutes, and just get like a sense of the world. Unless you're going to shoot like a 6-episode web series, which is also another like way to get into a network or something. But shooting an entire pilot, they kind of think that this is the final product, and I would stay away from shooting the whole pilot, actually.
I don't know anything about it.
Me neither.
All right, well, my final question to all three of you is very similar to on the advice train here. If you were to give people who are looking to either be in the industry that you, or the specific job that you're working in, or just in the industry in general, what is the piece of advice you would give them? And it doesn't need to be specific to being an Asian American or anything, unless you want to target your advice that way. But what's the advice you would give to somebody who says, I want to do what you're doing?
Who said that? That was so good. Go to engineering school. It's totally right on, brother.
Exactly. And change your mind. I guess from the writing side of things, you know, more than anything these days, it's a unique voice. So bring a perspective to something, keep writing, and do a lot of it, because, you know, practice is really key to it. But I do think a unique perspective and a unique voice that jumps off a page is a huge thing these days, and that's a great way to come in the door. And that's who you're gonna, and that's, you know, that's gonna be you.
I was like, cool. I was like really fascinated listening to what everybody has to say. I think, again, it's super pragmatic, but I think you have to stay out there and you have to keep meeting people. You know, it's obviously the name of the game is who you know, or whom you know, if you're into that. But it's true. Like, it's very difficult, of course, to like start off and not know that many people. But wherever you can get any foothold. I mean, I moved here and I didn't know anybody in like town, basically. I moved out here with a friend from film school, and we like had a sublet in Westwood, and we couldn't get jobs for months because we obviously were not qualified, and we didn't know anybody. And then the the kids that we were subletting the place from at UCLA, the summer ended, and they came back, and we just were like, we're not letting you kick us out. We'll keep paying rent. And so we slept on the floor for a while, and then we had to share a blanket because there was no space. We're still friends. We actually went out last night. But you know, he had like a professor, and the professor had a company. Our professor had a son, and the son had a company. Company needed people, and it was like just one. And I can trace every single job I've had, all the way back to that first one. Like kind of like you were saying about meeting her, Issa, you know, so long ago. Like, you got to plant seeds now, and realize that sometimes they take 10 years before they pay off.
I would say just don't be afraid to fail. I think even with my own short that I directed, wrote, produced, and starred in last year that went through a bunch of film festivals, I had like found that I had stock in Accenture, and I was like, I gotta cash that out. So then I called them and I was like, how much money do I have in this stock? And they were like, $5,500. I was like, let's cash it out. And she was like, we don't really recommend. I was like, send me the check. And with that, I just, literally it was money that I didn't even know I had. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna like not be afraid to make mistakes with this short, because it's my first time directing. I'm just gonna put it all out on the table. If it comes out shitty, it comes out shitty, I don't care. And and it came out great. I was like super happy with it, and now it's being made into a TV series, so it's all very exciting. But I would say I have a lot of friends who like don't make that short film or don't make that pilot presentation or web series because they're like, it's not perfect. You need to let go of perfection and just put it out there. If you watch the first 3 episodes of Awkward Black Girl online, the production quality is terrible. I don't even think they had sound. I don't think there was definitely like the microphone on the camera. And that we didn't have hair and makeup. We didn't have, you can see, like, we were doing our own outfits. We're very embarrassed by all of it. But the story was there. The characters were there. It's hilarious. So don't be afraid to put out something that may not be perfect.
Humble beginnings, and look for the stocks that you may have invested in.
Remember, Steven Soderbergh is shooting a movie with an iPhone, all right?
There we go.
That means you can too.
Yes, break out your iPhones, and right after this, go out and start shooting your projects. Thank you to Naren, Kabir, and Sujata for this wonderful panel. And thank you all for your questions and for joining us at the LA Asian Film Festival at C3 today.